This is a conversation today about being in the feminine, being in our intuition. I'm so happy to have you, Laura. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be among you and the lovely roster of beautiful priestesses that you've amassed for this. It's
Oh,
truly an honor.
yeah. Oh, well, thank you. I'm really excited about it. It's been really fun to see what's unfolding as we sit down and have these conversations. So I really, as I said, would love for us to talk about intuition today. But before we do that, I would love for you to share a little bit about your story and how you've come into the work that you do now. So give us just whatever's on your heart, whatever you feel like sharing about your journey and walking the path to being in this divine feminine work.
Well, I started almost 15 years ago professionally, but personally, I feel that the call towards intuition is something that has been with me since my earliest memories.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
something that I would relay memories to my family members that they had no recollection of. Uh, it was just this idea that I was tapping into something that nobody could really explain,
Yeah.
and nobody really had an answer for me, but I was
Right.
fascinated by it. And so it was something I cultivated all of my life, and specifically when I was going through my own troubles, through those teen years that we all sort of get a little awkward anyway. But I think I made a little more difficult for myself. I felt very disconnected from my center, from my core, very disconnected from an intuition, which had been my best friend, my closest confidant and guide for all of my life. And I felt something needed to change. My life became basically a series of poor decisions that I didn't really have anybody to guide me. And so I was left saying, okay, I have to guide myself.
Hmm.
I have to figure my way through this.
Yeah.
And I began following a nature based path. I got very, very close and intimate with the goddess. I felt such a sense of connection, such a sense of sistership. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have that in my vista growing up. So spiritually, on the spiritual level, connecting with the goddess, but then the relationships that I fostered, the sistership that I fostered with other women on this path, it brought such a sense of healing and connection. And as I began to work through my own issues, my own challenges, and cultivating that own like sort of unity consciousness and relationship with the self, I realized that I wanted to offer this to others. I wanted to create a space and hold this space for women to feel seen, to receive clarity, but also have insight that is given wheels through coaching and helping them actually take that insight, work with that insight, and go somewhere. And to feel like they're making progress in their life, making progress in areas that are troublesome for them, because I'd been there.
Yeah.
And I had to do that. And when we're in these professions and we're doing this work, there's a sense of I don't want to say obligation, but purpose and duty to take what it is we've learned, what it is that we've cultivated, and to help somebody who maybe is where we were. They're looking up at us thinking, oh, I don't have any clue how to get there. And it's not that we're perfect. It's not that we're flawless.
No, but we're holding the lantern ahead and we're like, oh, we
Right.
know what's, yeah, yeah.
Right, right. So,
Hmm.
I mean, for me, it was such an imperative. I mean, I dropped out of college. I was 3 years into a double major, double minor, exhausted, and that was
Yeah.
my passion for a long time. But I was like, this is it. This is what I'm meant to do. This is my calling, and I have not stopped since.
Yeah, beautiful. What does your work look like today?
Well, right now, basically, I offer intuitive readings, but the real meat and potatoes are the intuitive coaching sessions that I offer. Like I said, the readings provide the clarity. and they provide the insight. What is going on for you? What is circling your situation? Where is energy stuck or blocked? Where is it flowing? How can we help that along? And then the coaching gives that wheels. And we say, okay, now let's take this and actually put a plan forward. Let's create some goals. Let's create some accountability. Let's move through some of these blocks. Let's create greater flow. And let's cultivate that sort of, that sacred self-care of connecting with the self. So they're very intimate, my sessions, like sitting here with you. They're very sacred, but I have a belief that we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. So I want, as I'm sitting with women, I want them to feel seen and witnessed, but as though they're sitting with a best friend.
Yeah.
And they can laugh even as they're crying. They can, that they have somebody who sees and witnesses them, that supports them, that goes through everything just as though it were happening to me. I want them to feel just that sense of nurturing and support. And that's what I work very hard to cultivate and provide each woman I sit with.
Yeah, there's such a need for that. There's not, I mean, I sometimes when I first started this work and like really and started to realize that there's like a nice network of women doing this work, I had a moment where I was like, oh wow, there's so many women doing intuitive coaching, doing this kind of work. I wonder if there's a place for me. But the more I get into it, the more I realize, no, there's not enough of us doing. I mean, it's such
Right.
it's such important work right now as women are rising up and waking up, to have those support systems to fall into and those safe containers.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's where all this growth, and that's why I like the combination of, readings on their own are great. I offer them for some people, that's all they need, and that's their medicine, and that's potent, and that's wonderful. But I love, as an alchemist, blending the intuitive readings and the coaching because it does just that. It creates that container where we can sit and we can support one another. And that's where the true growth takes place in my belief.
Accelerated too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Really, yeah.
It's amplified. It's amplified to the nth degree. And I think it boils down to not just the combination of the different modalities, coaching and intuitive readings, but also the relationship that's fostered. Because I feel that we are rising as women. I feel that we are more in line with that unity consciousness, as opposed to that fracture that I think is societally perpetuated, where it's pitting women against women. I feel like we are coming together at such an accelerated rate. And I think that is creating uniformly and generally just this massive container for growth and support and total transformation. And I think it is so long overdue. And I think we're seeing it even, I'm not trying to bring in politics, but we're seeing it on the highest levels. I mean, women are just coming together in such strength and numbers, and it's that relationship, that sistership that is so powerful.
Yeah. I love that word, sistership. That's really powerful. I've never heard that before. That's actually a first for me. I really love that word.
Really? I don't think I came up with that.
Oh, I haven't heard it yet, so I'm
sure
really
I read it somewhere.
Yeah, I like that. That feels really good. So let's bring it back then to intuition. And you do intuitive coaching. So when did you start to put it together that what you were doing is your intuition? Was there a moment for you, or did you kind of always know that you have this knowing, you have this gift? Because for me, that blossomed kind of late. I was in my 20s, and then I realized, I was like, oh, that's what intuition is, and then I could go really deep with it, and things started really accelerating. But I'm wondering what your story was for kind of meeting and developing this relationship and trust with your intuition.
Well, I think for me, like, I loved hearing that because I was the opposite, where the intuition came before any of the coaching or even the work. Like I said, the intuition is something that I've been dialed very high end since I was quite young, and I've used
Yeah.
just every day in my own personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And I started off first with just giving readings. And as the years went on, for me, it was I noticed that I was coaching anyways, that even my readings included, to me, it wasn't just about, what is going on in your relationship, but why it's happening, what you can do. So
Right.
I felt like on an intuitive level, I already had that trust. I already had that sense of belief because I had worked with it for so long. And I do want to back up for a moment because I think it's important in this conversation to acknowledge that I think we're all intuitive.
Yeah,
I feel that we're
absolutely.
all born with this
Totally.
inner knowing, but it's like any
Mm-hmm.
muscle. If you don't use it,
Mm-hmm.
it atrophies. I just happened to be fascinated and grew up where I used it all the time. So that inner knowing was there, and I noticed that my readings were already this beautiful combination of coaching and intuitive readings or
Mm-hmm.
insight. So I just came to the conclusion one day where I was like, well, why don't I start to really nurture that,
Yeah.
rather than just, lumping it all together? Because some people, they don't like the coaching aspect of it. I've had lots of people that are like, I just want to know what the energy is looking like, what the cards say, etc. I'll figure the rest out on my own. And that's great. And it's important to honor that.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt that it was important to offer both, but to definitely nurture the combination of readings and coaching and fostering that container.
Great. So it sounds like, because what I think many of us struggle with
Hmm.
is trusting that inner knowing, because there is such a push to use our logical minds. And I still catch myself in this
Oh,
where
yeah.
I get too in my head, right? Just too
Mhm.
logical, overly logical. Not that logic has no place in our life, of course it
Right.
does, but I just get too much up there when sometimes it needs to be balanced out.
Hmm.
So I'm curious, I don't know if you have a response for that. Like, how can we bring more balance to using our logical minds, but also trusting that that deeper, like in your gut kind of knowing?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And what I teach those that I work with their intuition is ultimately the first thing that I would say is super important to achieving that self-trust in your intuition is self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
To know what fear feels like for you, to know what
Yeah.
anxiety feels like for you, so that when you begin to pick up on things or something intuitively comes to you, you can say, okay, is this me? Is this projection? You do
Mm-hmm.
it. Initially, sometimes you have to sort of pause and say, okay, where's this, is this me? Where's this coming from? And
Yeah.
if there's no explanation, and naturally that logical mind starts going, well, it could be this or it could be that. And I
Mm-hmm.
always say, let's just leave it open.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just keep this perception open. Whatever intuitive insights are coming, if, I'm an empath, so a lot of times it's feeling based for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it is important to know what those things feel like for you, and then to sort of just keep the mind open. You can't discount logic. And the more you try to
Right.
control it, the more you try to say, no, quiet, logic. I need intuition to run this show. The more that they're going to battle, and it's like pitting one against the other.
Totally.
So I think that there's spaciousness for both to coincide. And it's more about just remaining open,
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately, sometimes the more practical things when it comes to our intuition are the most solidifying, meaning that we gain the greatest trust for them. That we can just simply leave room for this to unfold and say, ah, I was right. This
Yeah.
was my intuition speaking to me. Or your brain logic can say, haha, I was right. I told you. And sometimes it's a mixed bag. But the more you create the spaciousness for that openness and that receptivity and that willingness to say, well, let's see, the
Mm-hmm.
more that you gain the trust and the more you feel it out. You
Right.
feel into it, and you can say, oh, this feels very, very strong. This feels like intuition pulling at me.
Yeah.
And other times where you're like, no, maybe my monkey brain's just going into overdrive,
Mm-hmm.
and that again, it comes with practice. It comes with being compassionate in allowing the time to really feel that out. I
Yeah.
mean, some of the practical things that I would do when I was just testing and sort of playing with my intuition when I was younger is I would just pick up a book and I would say, okay, I'm going to open it to this page.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to guess how many pages are in this book.
Right.
Just point to one on the bookshelf. And sometimes just by doing simple things like that, you slowly build up your trust in that intuition, that self-trust and that self-awareness
Yeah.
to trust in that voice.
Absolutely. I was going to ask, like, what is the exercise? But it sounds like it's just that of like the practice of remaining open, right? That it seems like that is the exercise, right? So I think when people are like, well, how do when even with our beautiful logical brains want to say, okay, well, intuition, that sounds like a good idea. That might be something that this whole system could use more of. Then the practice or the exercise that I'm hearing from you is just to give it space and to remain open.
Remain open. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's the first step. Like I said,
Yeah.
I think self-awareness is super important.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard about how behind every great therapist is another great therapist.
Yeah.
Every great coach has her coach, and vice versa. So I think the more we work on ourselves, the more that we create awareness of who we are, what things feel like to us. We know when we are in a place of anxiety or fear. We know what that feels like in our bodies. We know, the more that we can dial into that, the more we can trust when something comes forward. And I think that that's important when we're trying to read for ourselves, but also for those who use their intuition in their work and you start feeling something, maybe you start feeling anxious and you're like, wait a second, I don't feel anxiety usually in my solar plexus. Usually I feel it in my heart, my heart center. So, you learn to sort of read into those things and feel into that to help you understand what is you, what is, going on within you, what is the monkey brain, what is logic, and what is intuition from yourself or even others.
Yeah. Let's see, when you, where do I want to go from there? When you're, I guess, where do you see, what is the difference then between like a monkey mind and our logic? Because I like that you just brought that up.
Well, I see the monkey brain as more that primal part of our minds, that fear-based.
Yes, that's
like
okay. I think
around,
that's the
anxious.
important part. Like if we feel something coming up and it's really rooted in fear, sometimes it's not true.
Right. And the thing is that fear is a biological function, right?
Yeah.
It's kept us alive for years. It's allowed us to evolve as a species. It has its purpose. But fear is part of that primal, unevolved brain, right? So it doesn't know how to differentiate between a true threat, a mortal threat, and an emotional threat or a spiritual threat. So fear has its place, but when we're looking at intuition and we're looking at even our own personal evolution, we can't allow it to stop us.
Yeah.
And I think that those who are learning to open up and accept their intuition, the fear-based mind can sometimes be like, whoa, that's a what if. That's a big what if. We don't trust that. We don't know that. I have all the answers. I know everything.
Yeah.
And so it creates that sort of disconnect, or tries to. So I think if we can, obviously, yes, logic and monkey brain are not one and the same. They're not synonymous.
Yeah.
But sometimes we can confuse the two, I think, and we can sort of lump them together and mistake one for the other.
Absolutely. I'm glad that came up. I'm glad that you explained that difference, because I do think that is really important, because we don't want, I do see this sometimes, or I used to, I don't actually see it quite as much, but some of the women that I was working with, they're just very feminine, right? They like, and it's beautiful, but they were, I think, maybe a little bit almost resistant to their logical thinking, because sometimes maybe they thought, oh, well, that's a monkey mind. That's like, that's not, So I think having a healthy understanding of the difference, and it kind of reminds me of, a more, a masculine, feminine balance. You could kind of name it that way. You could say logical, emotional, maybe, not exactly the same thing, but so I think just having that balance and understanding what's healthy in both
right
makes for a really powerful intuition and a really powerful intuitive practice.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that the balance in general, and I agree with you, I've seen both. I've seen women who are so rooted in their femininity and their receptivity that they don't have as much of the active or masculine qualities.
Yeah.
Or, we can look at it logic versus intuition. And I've seen others on the other side of that
Totally flip
spectrum.
too. Yeah.
Right. So and so ultimately for me, the job or the goal rather is to create balance, to find that midway point where we can operate in that liminal space between the two, and to bridge that gap and find that harmony.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to see more of in this kind of divine feminine awakening as a lot more women are waking up and kind of coming to you? Like, what do you think we can do? Like, is there, trying to think how to phrase this question, like almost like, what's the next level? Like, what's the next step you can do, I guess? Like, so you kind of started this intuitive process, you recognize your intuition, things, maybe you're pulling cards or opening a book to a page and just seeing what's there and reading it and knowing that, okay, that was what I needed to hear in that moment. So a lot of these things are happening. Do you see anything, I don't even want to say more advanced, but just like a next step that could happen after that to kind of keep exercising these muscles?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that it goes next to really beginning to put it out there. A lot of times it's a very internal process, and we feel, and that's a great place to start. Once you gain that confidence and you feel that sense of security when it's just within your own, your own experience, that's wonderful. But next is taking it and putting it out there. And it doesn't mean you have to walk up to everybody on the street and say, "Hi, I'm Laura. I'm intuitive. Can I read you?"
Right. Right.
Or I think that XYZ is going to happen. You definitely don't want to necessarily do that ethically anyways. But I think that it is about putting it out there and saying, the energy feels today. Or even, my son will come home from school and all of a sudden I'll pick up on something and I'll say, okay, am I getting this right? I'm feeling some anxiety. Did something happen at school? And that's another way. I mean, even though that's my working with my intuition, for those that are trying to develop and strengthen that muscle, that is equally a powerful tool to begin to gain confidence, to flex that muscle a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because then you're not just keeping it in here. You're not just keeping it in the internal job. It's more of projecting it outward and being willing to put that outward and gaining that trust that it's not just you pick up on. We pick up on everybody's energy around us.
Well, and what a way to get that immediate feedback too.
Right.
With, using our relationship. That was a great example, using our relationships as, I'm feeling like something's here, even if that hasn't come up, right? Just like if it feels out of the blue, but I'm still going to go there, I'm going to just ask. That's really powerful. And that's where some real magic can start happening and things can start kind of speeding up a little bit, especially in relationships, when you just kind of embrace that, that kind of communication is really powerful.
Right. And the thing is too, is that if you're not quite ready to project it that far forward, and to be that, overt about it or that blatant about it.
Yeah.
I always tell my students to check in. When you wake up in the morning, before you roll over and grab the smartphone or the iPad or hop out of bed, lay there for a few moments. Take a few deep breaths, ask your guides, ask your angels or whomever you work with, or even speak to your intuition and say, okay, what is today going to hold? What does the energy already just right now feel like? And this is something I do every day. And for even whether you're advanced or a novice, it doesn't really matter. We're all students. So it's a tool we can all use.
Yeah.
And then when we do this in the morning, what is so beautiful about doing this upon first waking is that come evening, we can check back in with what we felt of the energy, what we perhaps had come to us. Sometimes I'll, just suddenly my inner knowing will tell me, you're going to hear from, your good friend Tracy, or you're going to have an issue with your son at his school,
Yeah.
and so by the time you get to the end of your day and you reflect, you can say, okay, this happened. This happened. The energy felt like this. And it definitely manifested. That's how it came through, So it's another way of extending the gifts in your energy field a little bit further from you without necessarily having to involve others if we're not ready for that. But it still allows us to have that feedback where we can just simply reflect on at the end of our day to see, okay, what did I tap into? What rang true? What resonated? And, what did that look like?
Right. Earlier you mentioned that your intuition can be based as being an empath. And so, picking up the feelings of others, right? Have you ever experienced, so when you've noticed that, okay, this isn't my energy, this is not actually me, I'm picking this up from someone else. How can we, if you catch yourself in that moment, what's the next step? What should we do when we realize, oh, okay, yeah, I feel that's real, but it maybe isn't necessarily mine. What can we do then?
That's a great, super, super powerful question. I'm really glad that you asked that. It brings to light another conversation, which is ethics. When it comes to reading, and hence the reason why I said you don't just walk up to somebody on the street and read them, because they may not be open to that. They may not want that.
Free will is important.
Right, absolutely. So I think that there's that's something to keep in mind, but I think it depends ultimately on the situation. For example, when I am dialoguing with my son or he walks into the room and I feel something, I'm way more likely to say, hey, Jaden, what's up? This is what I'm feeling. Is this you? Did something happen? And it creates a dialogue. Sometimes it's just like, no, Mom, I don't want to talk about it, in his true 15-year-old self. So, that's an instance where if you are feeling that you're picking up on somebody who you have that intimate connection with, who you're close with, who is open to receiving that, you can always, just broach it with them. And a good way of doing that is to simply say, I was feeling this sense of anxiety or fear or whatever it may be, and I knew it wasn't me and I was being pulled towards you. Is everything okay? Can I help in any way? Is there anything you need? Ask if you can be of service, or ask if if they're open to hearing what it is you were experiencing. And if they agree to that, then great. In some cases, they may not. And in which case, it's one of those things you just sort of have to release and let go. And if they decide to change their mind, then they come forward to you. But you have to honor wherever they're at in that particular moment.
Yeah. So I'm just asking personally, do you do any sort of energy cleansing of your aura, of your space?
Oh
yeah. I'm really into this too. I thought you might be.
Oh, I have to. Number one, I work from home running my business, doing intuition, opening to energy. But as an empath, I can't even go into a grocery store without, being inundated with others, emotions and energies. So shielding and protecting myself is super important. Yeah. And there's a few different ways that I do that. We were talking before the broadcast about the flower essences.
Yeah, and I've got a few of mine here too that I depend on, that I love. Yeah.
Yeah, so these ones are from I believe it's Anima Mundi Apothecary, but they do a sort of trifecta of flower essences. One designed for protecting your energy field when you're doing readings or any energy work. Another is designed for deepening the meditation experience, and another is for helping to really open up that intuition. So I use those pretty religiously. Smudging is super important, saging. I'm constantly, making sure my energy is clear, but also on a deeper level. And what I really, this threefold process, I make sure that my energy field is as clear and pure as possible. And that goes beyond just who I come into contact or what I come into contact energetically. It has to do with making sure that I'm not polluting that energy field with low vibe thoughts or words or actions, that I'm making sure that I'm not allowing others to pollute my energy field in that fashion either. So that for me is super important. And one of those things where if I start feeling my mind going, oh, you've got this, you've got that, and getting overwhelmed, I have to step back and say, no, I can't invite this in the energy field. I need to reject that and move that out and replace it with a more positive narrative.
Yeah, I completely relate. And actually, so this just came to me. I usually always have it like within a reaching distance, but I use rosewater spray. That kind of gets me back to like getting out, when I feel myself kind of like going that. And sometimes I just like need some water or like need to eat, like sometimes it's really not, I just need something else.
Yeah.
But whatever that something else is, the rose water spray, I'll do like a little mist of that, and then like it's like, oh, okay, you need to just go for a walk. You need to burn some energy, or and then it's like, okay, now I know the next step to get myself back. But it's that for me, that's just like my personal like trick. That's just like, oh, okay, come back to center. What's really observe what's going on. Don't be taken over by what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a wonderful point that it's not always just energetic. Sometimes it can be making sure that your body's nourished, making sure that you're filling it with healthy food, making sure that you are getting out and getting active and working on just fostering that physical strength or release as much as you would energetic. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is increasingly important as you delve into the intuition.
Absolutely. That's another balance. Yeah, a lot of balance happening with
it's all one juggling act.
It is. Okay, well, Laura, how can we book a session with you, follow you on social media? Can you let us know where your work resides?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to book a session or grab a cup of tea and read the blog, lots of articles on there, you can head over to intuitivealchemy.co. I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/ Intuitive Alchemist. Great. And on Instagram at Intuitive Alchemist. And Great. I do free readings every day. I think that you've seen a few of them every day for just getting an idea of what we're all going to come into contact with. So it's a nice little catch me up and nice little, glimpse into the day ahead for anybody who likes that.
I love that. Love it. Thank you for your time.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for guiding and holding this space.
Absolutely. It's my honor. Okay, well, everyone should absolutely follow you and get those daily readings. I love those. I think that they're great. And there's a few other women in this series who, it's not not always daily, but they'll do like a monthly astrology forecast or whatever. There's so much amazing content being produced by just this group alone. So it's really exciting, and I would absolutely recommend that everyone check that out. So thank you again for your time. It was so nice to have you.
Thank you.